Hello, the Digital Journey community, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Journey podcast, where we continue to bring you real experiences from real operators to help you identify how technology can take your business to the next level. Today, we're officially crossing our 10th episode. We're extremely excited to be entering in the new year and bringing you an episode on a bi-weekly basis. If you're interested in being a guest, be sure to head to our website, fill out our form. We're looking for guests through the end of the year, and we're excited to keep sharing your journeys. Without further ado, I'll bring on my right-hand man and co-host, Brandon. Hey, Brandon, how's everything going this week?
Hey, man, it's going good, man. As usual, dude. Great job. I'm looking forward to tonight. I'm looking forward to our guest. I know she's going to pack info into our community's ears, and we're all going to learn a lot, especially me, because I'm going to listen up and really digest everything tonight. So
there we go. I think we're finally settling into our rhythm, Brandon, and another great guest like the one tonight certainly makes it a lot easier. So without further ado, tonight's episode is going to be focused on standardizing cannabis for the future. We're going to be talking about what it takes to bring a new emerging market, really scale it out, and the roles in which both public and private sectors need to play in order to make it successful and, more importantly, safe for everybody to partake in. So without further ado, let me bring you our special guest tonight, Lezli Engelking, the founder of Focus. Lezli, it's so great to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Brandon. Thank you, and thanks for having me. I'm excited about this. I think this is it's a technology and cannabis are a great intersection, and I think this is going to be fun.
It certainly is. I think both industries are quickly growing, changing constantly, and the government's still trying to figure them out, right? So I think they have a lot of similarities. Yep. So obviously, Leslie, before we go into the whole topic, I'd love obviously first to let people know what Focus is. Of course, Focus, right, is the foundation of Cannabis Unified Standards. But of course, when it comes to the story of Focus and how you founded the company, it'd be great just to get, your story from your side.
Sure, happy to. So I actually grew up in Arizona, and my career started in the public health, mental health sector. Through that work, I met the folks at Eli Lilly and ended up going to work in the pharmaceutical sector for almost 13 years. I had other jobs kind of before and stuff, but that was sort of my primary thing. And when I left there in 2011, Arizona had just legalized cannabis for medical use. And some friends wanted to apply for a license and wanted me to get involved because of my experience in the pharmaceutical industry around quality assurance, quality control, regulatory structures, standards. And at first I said no, because this is 2011 and it was really, really scary then. No, but a lot's changed. But I just didn't know anything about it. And my dad's a defense attorney. I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to talk about pot at dinner. He's never going to invite me back, So I was scared. But eventually, through education and information from friends, I learned, about all the benefits that cannabis is having for people in different ways. And it sort of just stole my heart. And I thought, I'm going to give it a shot. I'll see what I'm going to do, see what happens. And so we actually applied for and won the first license in Phoenix, Arizona. And everything here is vertical. So we didn't just have a dispensary or a retail to sell products. We actually grew the products, manufactured the products, made them into food and beverages, and sold and transported them as well. So it's called vertical integration. It just means that you're basically your own supply chain. And so I learned in the 3 years that I was there, just day in and day out, we had a tremendous amount of success. but it was the hardest 3 years of my life. There was no understanding of general business practices, of quality management system principles. And so we didn't have a lot of documentation. We didn't have formalized training. None of our systems, our technology systems worked together. And so it was just literally like drinking from a fire hose every day about the same issues too. And coming out of the corporate world for my entire career, I was like, this is so weird. Like, where are the systems? And so after, talking to a lot of my friends, it was a much smaller industry back in those days, and realizing that they were all having these same problems, I talked to some of the industry associations and lobbying groups, and like, is anybody writing standards? And nobody was. And the reason it's a big deal in cannabis, I mean, I think it's probably pretty intuitive to anybody that yes, you're going to need standards for operations in a new industry, and those are going to have to be developed. The interesting thing about cannabis and why it's such a bigger deal in this space than it was, say, when, the internet, right, or broadband TV came about. It wasn't standards that were needed right then, for a couple reasons. One, they're not being ingested into people's body as food and beverages and medicine. But more than that is because cannabis has been federally illegal in the United States for so long that there's this tremendous stigma around it, and it's still federally illegal. And so while we have, more than half the country that has legalized cannabis for medical and adult use now, that federal conflict is still there where it's federally illegal. And so rather than the federal agencies that are typically responsible for licensing a manufacturer, an agriculture, producer, anything like that, the states had to write all these regulations. And so they didn't do any guidance documents or standards for the industry. They said, well, this is scary. It's marijuana. We better test it as much as we can at every point to make sure that it's safe and it's not getting in the wrong hands. And what that's done is really drive up cost in this industry. And it's horrible for patients because it also, it increases the length of time for a product to get to market. These labs are inundated, right? Most of them are not well trained and stuff. So standards are really important for cannabis because they're not coming from anybody else. And so after 3 years in my job, I decided to leave and start Focus as a standards agency. We're a 501c3 nonprofit health and safety organization that writes standards, provides third-party certification to cannabis facilities, training, risk management services to underwriters and regulators and those kind of things.
That's amazing. And that's certainly a really great journey of how you got there. And it's always so interesting to me, you never know like the path you're on until you're, way down the journey. And they always say hindsight's 20/20, but we found a similar pathway into the cannabis industry, and the first manufacturers that we were working all came from our pharmaceutical background as well.
Yep.
Obviously there's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of key differences, especially referring to the people that are involved in the spaces, not just how those industries are run.
No, for sure.
So I've always found it extremely interesting.
Yeah.
And obviously, Lezli, I want to bring it back just a little bit. Obviously, some of our viewers are aware of the cannabis industry right now. There's a lot more advertising, right? There's more products going out. Different states are all at different levels. But I think a lot of people are aware that, okay, cannabis is here in some form or another, but to what depth, at what degree, in what state, there's a lot of confusion and who's involved in the industry. I think very few know the key stakeholders and how the whole system runs. So where I'd like to start is kind of, much of where Focus helps, right? Each individual stakeholder, just helping people understand, the 4 to 5 key stakeholders that really drive this industry forward, right? And I think from my understanding and our conversations, right, it should be the cultivators, right, the manufacturers, the retail side, and then we also have, the research labs and more of the quality assurance facilities. Does that cover all of the key players? Did I miss anybody?
No, I mean, there's transport companies as well. Sometimes those are standalone entities, and sometimes they're just part of a vertical integration or something like that. So it depends. But yeah, the 4 primary areas are the people that grow it and produce it, that change it into something else, that sell it, and that test it or assure it.
Definitely. And obviously, like you're, alluding to, of course, everybody knows processes, right? Help businesses. It's no secret that if you don't have a process, it's a lot more confusing than if you have one. But essentially, what your company, is looking to do and is doing, right, is helping each one of these individualized stakeholders understand the formalities of their processes, right? Every layer of each procedure they have, and creating something uniform that enables them to not only operate, efficiently, right, but also safely, both for themselves and the consumers. Is that a fair definition
Absolutely.
of the value you're helping these stakeholders with?
Yeah, I mean, there's, traditional certification and standardization in any industry has, the business value of, increasing efficiencies, decreasing waste, improving your bottom line, reducing turnover, those sort of typical, efficiency measures to bring your business into a more lean state and continuous improvement type activities. But there's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot that isn't that in this space too. And a lot of people still in this space think of a certification as a marketing piece, right? Oh, well, I can put a stamp on this, or I've got a thing on my wall that says I've gone through this. It's not an easy thing to do. That is definitely not what focus certification is. And the standards were developed in a very meaningful way based on a tremendous amount of research from global institutions, as well as all the countries' cannabis regulations. And they're very detailed. And if you follow them, and everybody can follow the same standard and still do everything differently, right? It's not that I'm trying to get everybody to make the same cannabis product or use the same equipment, or, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff. And there's been a misconception that that's it. But there's a lot, because cannabis is a lot, right? I mean, if you think about it from, like, what is this plant compared to regulating a different industry? I mean, cannabis is a food and beverage, right? So it's a consumer product. It's an ag product. It can make shoelaces and ship sails and cars, and, replace plastic and wood and paper and, all of our natural resources that are running low. But it also has psychotropic effects, which is obviously where the control and regulatory concerns come in. It also has medicinal effects, right? And we don't want to cut out any of those. And so you have to kind of think about cannabis differently than you do other industries, because it really does, it hits so many different things. And I truly believe that's part of the reason our government, our federal government, is just having a hard time getting this involved, getting through this, because we've got agencies that do this for this specific industry and this for this specific industry, but cannabis hits all of them. And that's, that's a challenge.
Yeah. No, I think that's, a really interesting perspective. I've been obviously aware of the alternatives products, right, that cannabis can use. Obviously, people are seeing therapeutic rubs come out. Then you're seeing, zero cannabis, like THC driven products that still help with appetite, right, and other just natural, amenities. And then obviously you have the alternatives like hemp rope and things that are 10 times stronger and used on cruise ships, and hemp bricks and building houses now. But I've never seen that perspective of it, right? Where, like you said, it's the product itself can be beneficial to consumers because it's so dynamic, but the challenge with getting it to consumers safely and having a way between public and private is somehow trying to define walls to, its dynamicness, and making sure each piece of it falls into the right safety category.
100%. I have one of our advisors, and a good friend, Steve, always talks about, and when I was sort of learning about the challenges of this, like, if you think about how does the government agencies, how does the public health agencies look at regulating corn? Because if you think about it, corn is an agricultural product that's grown in the field, right? And up until it's harvested, USDA is responsible for the oversight of that, and maybe some EPA with pesticides and stuff, but it's not FDA. And then once it's, chopped down, cut, sold, and moved on to the next part of the supply chain, it's FDA, right? And so that's not scary with corn. If we make cornflakes, it goes to FDA. If we make ethanol, it's going to go to EPA, right? Like, there's different agencies that are going to be responsible for this. In other food industries and everything, we're okay with that. But in cannabis, it feels scarier because the entire thing is each industry of itself. Like, it's got basically all these different industries. And so it is, I mean, I empathize with anyone trying to figure this out. I've been working at this for 14 years and I still am learning every day. You know what I mean? And this is all I do. So it really is a challenge. I think it's important for people to understand that. And I'm not saying the US government is the best thing ever. I'm not trying to be political in any way, but regulatory agency, I mean, big ships turn slowly, right? And our government is a really big ship. And so it takes a while to get there. And with cannabis being more considerable or more considerations than other things, you can kind of understand why we're still here.
Certainly. No, and like you said, I think it's been a long time for people that have been in the space, but it's still, very early for the space and industry as a whole. And at the end of the day, there needs to be research, there has to be reports, there has to be findings that are based on historical data. And within the first 2-3 years, the government's just not going to open anything up that they don't know and truly believe can be, safe for all of its consumers. So I really like that. And obviously just going back a little bit to the stakeholders, we have, the cultivators, the distributors, retail, and the labs. I'm curious through, your experience and where the industry is right now, do one of those stakeholders, have it more difficult than the others when it comes to getting started and really trying to enter the industry?
I mean, I want to say yes, but I need to start with a disclaimer that it's really hard to start a cannabis business, and for reasons that nobody understands until you actually start a cannabis business. I mean, it's hard as this. I started a nonprofit, and it's super hard, and it has to do with cannabis. It's not a cannabis business, right? But everything is like twice as hard. If it's one step to go get your license or go get your insurance or go get your advertising or get your hiring stuff done in a regular industry, it's 3 to 5 for every single thing in this business. And then there's just so much, because again, it touches so many, we're talking about food code and fire code and security for law enforcement. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So it takes a while to get all that.
Got it. Yeah, and it sounds like obviously it's like one of those things you just start pulling on the string, and obviously it just keeps growing, and more steps come in, and obviously with the degree of some vagueness or gray areas right now within those steps, it can be even more difficult to identify. What step am I supposed to take next? Can I do this or do I have to do that first?
Right.
And I know, Brandon, in the past, we've spoken about it as well. I think you mentioned, right, your mom had opened up a tobacco shop originally, right? And ran a tobacco business. Is that right?
She's had a shop for 25 plus years, and she actually applied for a distribution license, which was, about $50,000 to apply. There were 90 people that paid $50,000 plus attorneys, so about 30 grand in attorneys fees to process the paperwork as well.
At least, yeah.
There were 90 applicants, 3 were accepted, and that's just the way it is. So if you don't have deep pockets.
And that's
or you don't have the proper connections with the deep pockets, it's going to be a difficult journey. But I wanted to ask you real quick, vertical integration. So I think people don't understand how integrated this is already into the mainstream workflow in different products already, right? We all think of, I think the majority of people see somebody, out on the corner walking through the city smoking a blunt or something. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is providing a quality control, compliance, standards, everything else like that. So to make a product to get sold to a vertical market or a integration, that, as you call it, to go. Is that correct? Kind of where you're kind of leading with the 501c3 with your organization?
Yeah, I mean, so we are a health and safety organization. Our mission is to protect public health, consumer safety, and the environment by building integrity into the cannabis industry. And our vision is a long-term, global, safe, legal, sustainable cannabis industry. And so everything that we do, whether it's through certification or through the education and training that we give or the public information, is really designed about building better. right? And making sure that we're being very cognizant as an industry. We've got the opportunity to remove some of the stuff that has plagued other industries, to really get beyond that and build better. But in order to do that, it takes collaboration. And unfortunately, this industry is still very fragmented. And so it's health and safety is health and safety to the folks that work there, right? Health and safety to anybody that ingests, inhales, puts a salve on any of the products. Health and safety to the folks delivering it, health and safety to the operators so that they have bank accounts and don't have, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash in their facilities all the time. Health and safety for employees so that there's not concerns about the environmental conditions and their, what they're inhaling when they're working in a grow facility indoors for 12 hours a day, 4 days a week or whatever.
Yeah, and this market is coming, whether people want to accept it now or they want to accept it later. The market is coming. The tidal wave has already, like, the volcano has gone off. The wave is coming. So it's either you can kind of like get on board now and start to understand it. It's just like liquor, right? And beer and alcohol. People are against it, and then then it's all over the place. It's the same here. I'm all for the standards. I'm all for the regulations, the compliance, all those types of things, because that's what really makes a difference. What drives that is, I just want to tell a quick story. So vaping. Now, I also want to put this disclaimer out there. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I work out and I work. That's what I take care of my family. I walk my dog. Like, that's it. I'm just about as straight as they come. I may act crazy and so forth or whatever, but I'm about as straight as they come, right? So I just want to put that disclaimer out there, okay? But, it's kind of like, I am all for anything that's going to help improve somebody's life, perhaps it be from a mental standpoint because they suffer from some type of mindset or depression or eyesight or any of these different things, right? Or if it's going to help improve a lifestyle, So I am all for that. And that's kind of why I love to come on the show with Brian and someone like yourself, because, we're kind of all on the same page with that. We're not saying go out and abuse this or abuse that. There's going to be people that abuse stuff all over the place. They abuse Oxycontin. They abuse this. They abuse every single drug that a dentist gives you. Right. I understand. But I remember with vaping that they didn't have any regulations. They didn't have any compliance around it. And people were doing, vape juice and whatever in their kitchen, buying stuff from China, getting the ingredients and mixing it up. They changed the law. There was compliance that came through. It's about $1 million to get a license to be able to actually manufacture a juice through compliance, right? And it wiped out that whole middle section. So although, yes, vaping's still out there and stuff like that. And again, I don't vape. My kids, I don't know what my kids do. That's up to them, right?
Nobody does.
Yeah, I'm just saying. It's like you have to have some sort of laws, of regulations, of standards, some type of standard operating procedure. In business, we always talk about this in technology. You have to have some type of standard operating procedure around what we're doing, and that's what you're providing.
Well, and think about it from if cannabis is being used as, and I'm going to say medicine, like a pharmaceutical, like what's gone through FDA with Marinol and Epidiolex and that's one thing. But if it's being used like what you're talking about as a wellness product, as a therapeutic product, you know what I mean? Just kind of for adults that, again, whatever their ailment, that it's helping them, because it does do so many different things because we have these endocannabinoid systems and all this, right? So whatever they're using it for is fine. But if you're using it as a medicine and you are going to a dispensary and you find something that works so well, let's say you have anxiety and your doctor says, well, try this because the anxiety meds haven't worked for you, right? And this is legal in your state. Go get a medical card, talk to somebody who knows, try this and see if it works. And you do. And you go into the dispensary and whoever you get, they talk to you, and whatever you buy, they talk you into, you go home and it works terrific. You can go back to that same dispensary 2 weeks later, buy the same product, more than likely with the same SKU, and not get that same effect. That's not medicine. You can't depend on that, right? Think if somebody went to the pharmacy to get their blood thinner And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. I mean, that's a very extreme example, but even your migraine medicine or your blood pressure medicine. I mean, think about somebody's, just high blood pressure going crazy in and out if it just because the medicine wasn't consistent. And in pharmaceuticals, which are considered, traditional medicine, there's, a relative range that, a percentage of strength that they have to be from the regular, from the product. But we don't have those limits established in cannabis. And so it's really important. And then the other thing is cannabis, and you'll hear it, I'm sure you've heard it if you're in this industry at all, but people always say, well, cannabis is the safest plant. Nobody's ever died from cannabis. It is absolutely true. And I am not here to argue that. And every, activist and enthusiast will push that as a reason that we don't need regulatory structure. But what they don't understand is the folks that were growing cannabis in their backyard for decades and trimming it by hand and drying it out and cooking it and selling it to their friends, that was safe. The cannabis isn't the problem. It's the process, right? So what happens now when we're growing cannabis indoors in a contained environment with 200,000 square feet and 50, 60 to 300 people going through that facility every day? It's the human element and the process that brings the risk, not the cannabis. It doesn't really matter what you're processing. You still got to control it because if it's cross-contamination from somebody not washing their hands or hair getting in it or something's on the counter, like an allergy, if it's not labeling something correctly, like those are all, they have to be addressed. And there's so many that in cannabis, because it does, it goes throughout the supply chain, that it's just a lot to know. And they don't have references for what to know. They don't have a checklist in this industry. And that's what we're trying to give them is, we're really here to help this industry grow and succeed as we contract with operators, whether they're growers or manufacturers or retailers. Our goal is to help them build their business into everything that they want it to be. And that means that not only are we looking at where you are today, but we're looking at where do you want to be in 3 years and where do you want to be in 5 years, so that if we understand your goals, we can build your growth plan and your compliance plan along with that to make sure that you're building sustainable systems for doing the same thing that you're doing today times, 10,000 or whatever it is.
What do you think the percentages of recreational versus pharmaceutical as of this moment, like 50-50 or 60-40 recreate? Because I think the tides is going to be like 80% medicinal, 20% recreational, or not even higher than that.
Are you talking about usage? Are you asking about like usage, like how many people use cannabis as a medicine versus use it to get high or for some other recreational?
Yeah, exactly. Versus a recreational type thing, like a beer or something,
I'll answer you, but I have to say it's important to understand that cannabis in state medical programs, which is called medicine, is completely different than cannabis sold at the FDA, which is medicine by traditional definitions. The only real medical part of these state programs is that the states called them that. But the products have not gone through any of the trials, any of the approvals, any of the quality control or quality assurance and standardization of a medical product. And this is a systemic problem in this industry. And part of the reason that we're having a hard time at the federal level going, how do we merge all these state programs? They're not going anywhere. You asked earlier, right? No, we're in how many states? 38, 39 states now. Like it's not going back. And they're growing tremendously. And, from a financial standpoint, our country needs the revenue. And that's why states are jumping on this. So it's not coming back. But somehow we've got to rectify the definition of medicine or else change the vernacular so that we understand that this is more therapeutic adult use in the state programs. They don't need to meet standards for pharma. They're not being sold as a life-saving medicine that's got to be the same dose every time, refrigerate, all these things. Like these are things that can be used in a different way. It's still very medicinal. And so I have a hard time answering, is it more medicinal or adult use? Because it's just not that black and white. Like anything in cannabis, it's completely gray, right? It's not what's medical, what's not. I think we will, just personal, like you want me to give you a prediction kind of opinion, I'm happy to throw one in. I think that we will, cannabis as medicine as traditional pharma medicine and all the benefits from it will never go away. I do believe that we will continue to grow and understand the data around the therapeutic side, and that will become even more powerful. And so what I really truly involve later is, and think that we're going to see, is that it's all going to come back together. It's not going to be therapeutic or adult use. It's going to be cannabis as this is regulated this way. Cannabis as this is regulated that way. What you use it for shouldn't matter, right? It's like what the product is and that kind of stuff. Because, I mean, think about GNC and all these supplement companies and everything that's out there, right? Like, people use those for lots of different things. They're not under the FDA. Cannabis is always going to have a part that's going to be a food or a bev or a supplement or something. And so it's the medicine part gets kind of hairy there. You know, does that, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, no, that
I want to explain that it's not quite that simple.
That definitely does. I've also heard of some of the manufacturing plants like getting teamed up because they already have that process done, meaning the shipping lines and the labeling makers and everything else behind the scenes. So you pull up to a big factory that's done, you know, small food packaging or candy or something else like that for years and years and years, and has a manufacturing process. You see a nice sign out in front and you don't know, but inside, you know, is pumped. They're using that chain line to actually produce. Do you see a lot of that too, or have you heard a lot of that? Or in some
we are
instances?
definitely seeing more of it recently. You know, like when earlier on, you know, a decade ago, it was so new. There was only a few states that were involved, and most of the operators that were involved came out of this legacy traditional market that had been illegal and what they call the black market or the illicit market, right? And so that led, I mean, again, contributes to part of the reason that we're in this situation. Cannabis still has a very large stigma around it, right? It's been federally illegal in this country for so long. It was very stigmatized through advertising and marketing for so many decades. So, I mean, and it's interesting. I see it, even me being in this industry, you know, for 13 years now, and like, my mom came and helped me open the dispensary that we ran. And like, you know, she used to be the Mental Health Association executive director, but she still, even though she tries so hard not to, she'll be like, oh, but it's weed. I don't know if that, you know, that just, it's so foundational to thinking, and people don't realize it. And it's going to take a while to change. I mean, we're getting there, and the more people that try it, but there's a lot of, I don't know, there's just a lot of stuff that still has to be rectified around it for it to move forward like that.
Yeah.
Play. Awesome. No, and I think honestly that brought, you know, a lot of light to a lot of different aspects, you know, of the world. Because I think, you know, like Lezli, the clarity that you brought to medicinal, you know, versus recreational, which at the state level right now is pretty much just like the difference of a license that you can have, right? It's not so much relatable to the product. It's just more relatable to you as a consumer and how you're able to consume, right?
No, in fact, most states allow the existing medical operators to be sort of grandfathered into their new adult use program. I mean, Arizona, when we just went adult use last year after 10 years, and it was literally like the law passed, and within a week, these operators had flipped a switch and already were selling in the adult use market. Before new applications came out for new operators or anything. So yeah, it one feeds the other for sure.
Definitely. It's very interesting. And I think we've done a good, you know, emphasis so far of kind of like, you know, how everything's progressing here in the US, you know, the key parties that are involved. And I know, you know, you do some work obviously outside of the US and see what's going on there. So I'm just curious around, you know, obviously we've laid this nice foundation. We'll keep going here in the US, but if we took a brief look, you know, around the globe and in other countries that are also looking to facilitate this, right? Because the US is certainly not the only one. And, you know, others even have, you know, better resources for it to grow more of it. I'm curious, do you see them taking a similar approach? Have some of them been a little bit more progressive because it brings bigger benefits to their country? I'm just curious how you're seeing the tide shift in any of the other countries.
It's a great question and a really interesting answer too, because most of the world, regardless of the industry that you're talking about, not just cannabis, right, but would prefer to follow U.S. standards, regulations for trade, right? We're known for having that kind of stuff down and being that. So, but the U.S. hasn't done that for cannabis at the federal level. I mean, we did it for them, but this government hasn't accepted it and legalized it yet. Yet there's 49 countries that have in the world, and that's countries, right? So we've gone state by state by state, one by one, little by little, kind of changing things, and other countries just switch it on. So almost everybody is further ahead than we are. Certainly they've had problems, but I do believe that as a country, we are losing ground right now because of our lack of action on this. And that's not a slap to the federal government and what they're doing. I empathize with what a big job this is, but it's a critical time for us to consider. All these states are doing this because they want this revenue. But if we're giving away this industry to other countries because our federal government can't get involved, what is that doing to this industry? And what is it setting up the United States for competitively, right? I mean, we should be able to grow hemp like no, I mean, we should be doing so much stuff. And we are already, the US is very well advanced as far as what they know, their technologies, their processes, like what they're learning, their
supply chains,
innovation, the supply chain, all that. But we literally can't apply it because it's still federally illegal. And so it's a frustrating situation for the industry for sure, because, you've got, this is why the standards matter. You've got an operation in Arizona, California, New York, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Washington State, and Alaska. And and Massachusetts, of course. And every single one of those has a different regulatory structure. Not only are the actual regulations that you have to meet different, but the agencies that oversee them are different. The reporting structures are different. The communication structures are different. And then they change all the time because nothing is, everything just keeps going. And it's like, so there's constantly rule changes in this. So it's chaotic. We're just, I don't know.
It's hard. It seems like, obviously, like you said, if you're trying to be a larger organization, you're pretty much, decentralized, operating 17 independent companies that happen to sell the same products, but also sell different products based on each state's regulations.
I waited tables and bartended when I was in college, right, to make some money. And we would take, a restaurant, let's just say, what is a big chain? Like TGA Fridays, I think everyone would know, right? So if I'm the manager at TGA Fridays in Arizona, and we're opening up a TGA Fridays in Nevada when, the Palladium shops are opening, I'm going to send my Arizona team, my best of my best, up there for a month. They're going to do one-on-one training with the management team, the executive team, the staffing. They're going to make sure the computer systems work the same way. They're going to make sure the products come out the same way, that the presentation is the same way. You can't do it here. You can't even go into the other state and oversee your products being made by the other people. It literally is co-branded licensing. So I'm in Arizona. I own my company. I want to sell my products in California. I have to find a partner that's willing to sell them, but also willing to make them up to my standard.
Correct.
It's crazy. You can't just, it literally is starting a new business every time. And it's hard because it makes no sense from a business standpoint, right? Like that from an efficiency standpoint, from a consistency standpoint, being able to know what you're doing, like, having to do it differently every place is horrendous, but they're forced to do that. And that's really, for me and for our clients, that's what they love, is they're like, okay, we're looking at global standards now. They may not be regulated and mandated yet, but we're building towards this because no matter where they go, we'll be okay and we'll be prepared,
Definitely. No, and I think, that's where a lot of people don't recognize, and I think a lot of others, right? There's a lot of small businesses that are trying to enter this industry. There's a lot of opportunity, for the smaller guys, your guys that have owned farms for the last 30, 40 years. The dairy market's been killing them over the last 2-3 years, right? All their traditional means of producing income, are slowly being diminished. And then you had a wave for them maybe 5 years ago when fracking came, and they hoped that their land would be approved, right? Because that was an opportunity, but then that didn't work. And now cannabis comes, which is, in regards to the agricultural aspects of the business, right? It's very safe. You don't have like extremely heavy machinery, right? You've got like the most basic stuff you're going to use to, harvest hay, right? In the same general process. And it speaks to a large opportunity to keep making America agricultural, very powerful, and also help, bring the smaller classes up to the top, right? The working class, let them build more businesses. But obviously these regulations are stifling them, right? And like Brandon said, from his mom being one of 90, right, that didn't get approved, and just the amount of money it takes to be in that process, to let alone if you are one of them that are approved, just to survive in the state that you're in, let alone try to grow it, is almost, unfeasible for anybody that doesn't have, multiple six figures in the account and at least a staff to run true operations on a day-to-day basis.
And sitting in the account with nothing else named, earmarked for it, right? Like you have to literally have it. I mean, it's a lot. And it's all a commitment before you ever have any guarantee of a license. You can't, it's not, oh, I pay these fees, I get a license. Brandon's example was perfect. There's 90 people applying for 3 licenses. They're all filling out the exact same forms. They're giving the exact same information about their operations. Another huge challenge in this space is then whoever they give that information to, how do they know what they're reviewing? Have they ever been in a cannabis facility? How do they know what an effective standard operating procedure looks like for extracting cannabis? You know what I mean? Like, how do they know what the cross-contamination rules should be somewhere that's making 18 different food and beverage products, but also processing the raw agriculture in the same building? Like, you don't. And they're not reviewing it. And again, it puts more burden on the industry long-term than anything. So, in states that have been trying to do this, it's interesting to watch. So when I started talking about this stuff and started Focus in 2014, the industry wanted nothing to do with it. The regulators were scared to death of me and didn't trust me. Like, it was a very different situation. And it didn't go, like, nobody got this. And now people are getting it. But the reality is, like, how do you meet all those regulations? How do you do all that crazy stuff? You have to have systems that are documented, that you can go back and say what happened and all of that. And it's just not there. And it's a weird thing that it's not there. People don't understand, like, what do you mean it's not there? People don't have any guidance on how to run their business. No.
Yeah. They don't even have training wheels. Yeah.
No.
And I'm curious, obviously, so if we could get federal, legalization, and we started coming from the top down, it would certainly, expedite the process, if you will. But do you see in the industry, obviously there's individuals just like yourself, right? A lot of people are trying to come together and make it easier, help businesses, and really just drive the industry forward, right? Whether they're inventing new products or helping with standardization or consulting, right? A lot of great people are entering the space. Do you think it will come down to, the federal regulation coming in saying, okay, let's systematize this and standardize it federally? Or have you seen any of the states start to come together and say, let's all, create the same standards, so at least interstate wise, we can start to grow with one another? I'm just curious if you've seen that collaboration happen at all.
No. Not historically. I will say that there's an organization called CANRA. It's like CANNRA. It's the Cannabis Regulatory Association, and it is, I can't tell you the exact number, but I believe it's 30-ish states and all the folks that are running those programs that are now working together in an association to talk about best practices and things like that. I'm not clear on how far they've gotten, but it's great that they're talking about it, right? I mean, these folks are critical to the success of this because they understand it from a regulatory perspective. My business partner and certification director, Vice President Erin Kennedy, she comes out of aerospace defense and lean manufacturing and Six Sigma, but she was actually invited to Oregon up to start their medical marijuana program and write the dispensary rules and be a regulator. So she, it's part of the reason she's with us, because she's got that other side. I've got it was my business, I've tried this, but she's got I tried to regulate it and it was hard. And very much like I felt with trying to help, businesses, she felt like with clients, like with operators, she's a regulator and she can't help them because there's that wall and you're not supposed to, and all that, what I mean? Like, you can't give too much advice. And so this is a nice place because we're not a regulatory body, right? We're not an enforcement agency, but we can come in and get your business there and hold your hand to make sure that you're not having any gaps or missing anything that could cost you your business or somebody's life or lawsuits or anything else.
Yeah, Lezli, I think about when I think about all this, I think about Like going to the airport, I used to fly a lot, and when I go to the airport, like you need to have a central tower, like telling people what the standards are. You just can't have planes. Just because you have the money to buy a plane doesn't mean you should be driving around the airport, right? You need a central tower, a quality control tower to tell the planes, hey, this is the standard. If you're going to land at Heathrow, you're going to need to land between 6 o'clock a.m. and 11 o'clock at night. If you're not able to hit that, then it needs to be an extraordinary circumstance or something else like that, right? That's the first standard. So these are the simple standards. Like when you come, you're going to need to wait. You're going to need to connect with the tower. You're going to need to understand. It's the same thing here, but it just seems like we don't have that yet. We're just kind of all driving around wherever we want with our own planes with, a lot of different dangerous weapons and not weapons
But some people love that, right? I mean, you're spot on completely, Brandon, but some people like the chaos of the lack of structure, right? There's an opportunity. Chaos breeds opportunity, right? If you can deal with that and get in there. I mean, COVID's a perfect example of all the businesses that were started and all of that. And so cannabis has a lot of that. And that's part of the industry that we don't want to see stick around. I mean, there's a lot of people here in the green rush trying to just make, stick their stake in and make their money and get out. And they don't really care if they're building a better industry. They don't really care about safe products. They are going to be in and out of this in a couple of years. That is a huge problem for this industry. We fight as an industry this huge stigma. So we start from so far behind, and not having a unified voice around that, not being able to, you know what I mean? It just makes it so much worse. And you can't, I don't want to say more than that.
It's going to take time. It's going to take time to build what you're building. I mean, it's also going to take money too, because with any type of compliance, it takes money for people to be compliant, for companies to be compliant. But without compliance, it costs
more money though, right? Like the misconception about compliance, and we don't actually, tout ourselves as a compliance company. We are an operational efficiency and business success, business performance company. But compliance is the baseline for quality, right? You can't even keep your license if you can't meet the regs. And so it is a lot of what we do, because operators still struggle in that industry. But
Definitely. No, I think, it's still early, and I think, obviously, Lezli, where you were alluding to before is there are still, though, right, bringing us back. There is the FDA, right? There's the USDA. We've gone through this process before. It's not something that, is unknown to an industry emerging. And I think it was in one of our early conversations or on one of your, webinars that your team did, where I think someone that joined said it was either the FDA or the USDA. The initial standards took something around like 20 plus years or something like that
30 plus years to write the food code.
Yeah, 30 plus years to write the food code, which is like one of the craziest statistics I've ever heard, I think.
But nobody understands that, because from the public's perspective, or even from a business, an operator's perspective, you don't understand all the iterations that go through and how, like all the work and stuff like that. And so you hear constantly in this industry, like, oh my gosh, the feds are taking so long. This is forever. We've had legal, cannabis in this country for over a decade now, and they can't get anywhere. But as I, tried to point out in the beginning, cannabis is bigger than just one industry. It's complicated. And 10 years isn't that long when you think about it. It took them 30 to get through our food code. And hopefully we're getting better, right? I mean, the government's job is continuous improvement, just like any business. But so hopefully it won't take us 30 years. And I don't think it will. I mean, we're going to be out of control if we wait another 20 years. We're pretty much out of control already. But so, yeah, I don't think it will be. But, yeah, it's a real factor. And, one of our partners is the Association of Food and Drug Officials, who actually predate the FDA. They've been around forever. And I think it was probably Steve, the executive director, who's a good friend of ours. Yes. And saying that. But that's part of the reason we work with them so closely, because they are, the grant recipients from FDA, and they help the states implement the programs. And so we have a lot of insight into how that works and how we can help, guide them and give them the resources that they need. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter how hard Focus works or any other company in the cannabis industry works. It's the government that has to make the change first. And for me and for Focus, we're just hopeful that we can have a voice in that really represents the public health and safety sector, because there's not really anybody else representing that right now.
Definitely. No, I love that. I think it's, the clearest way to say what you guys do. I think obviously as more and more people, if they're not in this space, they're trying to grasp exactly, all the layers that we're talking about, plus how you help on top of them, which can be difficult. But I know we had discussed, and we actually got a diagram from you. So if you're comfortable, I just wanted to share your guys' proposed model of, the different layers of how things could be regulated. Exactly. And just the examples of the different products, which I think might just give people a better visual to everything that we've been talking
about. And I already mentioned it earlier, so it's probably great to show the actual imagery.
Can we see this on our end? We should be able to. Let me just pull it up. There we go. So you can see that, right? Is it big enough on your end, Leslie? Let me see.
Well, I'm blind, so don't ask me, but I'm sure everyone else can see it, and I know what it says. So it's fine.
Okay, perfect. So if you could just walk us through a little bit, Leslie, I think it'll bring more clarity.
Again, so actually, I'll just give a little bit of background. This infographic is part of a response that Focus drafted to the Democratic request for comments on a proposed legalization bill. And that legalization bill was basically trying to regulate cannabis like alcohol. Using same agencies, same sort of controls and all that. And they were just wanting feedback on what they had proposed. And, our team read it and we had a long discussion about it. And it's scary to me that our government would even consider regulating cannabis like alcohol. Alcohol isn't good for building houses and things like that. Alcohol isn't, it may be an ingredient in a pharmaceutical, but it's not a pharmaceutical itself, right? Alcohol isn't a medicine ever, right? Like that. So it's there. And how can we have this plant that we've ignored for, 100 years in this country and made illegal and decide we're going to regulate it and then completely wipe out an entire area of benefit that the plant brings? Like that just is senseless to me. And so what we did, rather than just answer the questions that the senators were asking through this response, is say, let's tell you what we think you should do. So this is in no way perfect. There's lots to kind of flesh out, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing with that. But what this basically is our thought process on, and it's basically what I mentioned before. The first column is the therapeutic and adult use. I don't know if my cursor's working there or not, but and so this is basically the existing state frameworks that we have today, right? All the state, whether it's adult use or medical, all across the country fall under that pathway. And so what we're proposing is there is a different new agency that's independent of FDA, USDA, any, EPA, any of that would regulate the products and processes and people under that pathway. We don't have a lot to figure out there because Focus standards are that pathway, right? We've written the standard for that pathway. So, and then the other end on the far right column on the pharmaceutical, and again, there's a difference between therapeutic and adult use. That's why it's not medical on the left. There's pharmaceutical, which is the FDA pathway. And there's 3 companies that have already gotten cannabis through the FDA as a pharmaceutical or, an active pharmaceutical ingredient. That's a pretty clear pathway. It may be really hard and most cannabis businesses may not want to take it, but it's clear. There's not a lot of work to do. Industrial, likewise. We grow ag for lots of reasons and different products and stuff. There's good regulatory structure. There's good trade systems. There's good standards that can be, adapted to this. But it's really this whole CPG, so consumer packaged goods. So the food and beverages, right? And this is where it's gotten really complicated because cannabis is the plant, but we're regulating it as 2 different things. So we're regulating hemp, which is cannabis, with what the government has defined as less than 0.3% THC. And then there's marijuana, which is more. But it's the same plant. They act the same. They do the same. You know what I mean? So we're regulating around the fear of the psychotropic effects and not wanting people to get high and all that. We're thinking of it like a substance of abuse, like an alcohol or an opioid. but it's not, right? It's different. It doesn't cause those health problems. It can be very healthy for you if it's ingested the right way, or, handled the right way, if it's made the right way, and that kind of thing. And so when you see this CPG food and beverage column, that's all the stuff that you're seeing sold in gas stations, on websites, on doctor's offices, all that. None of that is regulated. So all that right now, it comes from hemp, not marijuana, because if it's marijuana, it has to be sold under a state licensed program. But if it's hemp, it can be sold anywhere because it's not federally illegal anymore. And so this has really been, since 2018, when the Farm Bill legalized the hemp side of the industry, problematic, because FDA was meant to come in and say, we'll write the regulations for all this and make sure that everybody knows what the product specifications need to be, and safety precautions, everything. So what the Farm Bill did is regulate up until the point of harvest. It covers the ag, right? It's just a USDA thing.
Just the cultivation bucket, essentially, right?
All the products. Yeah. I mean, farmers are so excited. The Farm Bill, the intent of the Farm Bill was to bring back, the American farmer and really get our farming industry back. And they always seem to get hurt in every industry. So to be able to really strengthen that part of our supply chain. But so the Farm Bill passes, all these farmers get involved. They grow all this hemp. Nobody to sell it to. Just such an
they're not
oversupply.
allowed to distribute it. Yeah.
And then the next year, 2019, 2020, they've got so much extra product from the first year that they create tolling agreements with the manufacturers so that they guaranteed their product will be sold if they grow it before they ever, plant anything or whatever. Well, that's great. But then the next year, what happens? It's still an oversupply of excess in the supply chain. So the next thing that happens the next year, and COVID hits too, is, oh my gosh, we're flooded with all these oils and these extracts and you know what I mean, the crude and things like that. And because there's been too much grown, there's been too much manufactured. And so all of a sudden we see Delta 8 products, right? Delta 8 is a different kind of THC that occurs naturally in the cannabis plant and hemp plant in the smallest quantities, not anything that you could ever measure to speak of. And we've figured out a way as an industry to take all this excess hemp CBD oil and extract it and use some chemicals and get it to a place where it can have the psychotropic effects of marijuana. No regulations to stop it. So you can't blame the industry for trying to sell their products and keep their businesses alive. I mean, that's what they're supposed to do. They are able to do this because we have a lack of direction from the federal government. I mean, literally, it is just lack of clarity. And even if they're not ready to regulate it, say it's illegal. You know what I mean? Say something, but they're not saying anything. And so it really is, I mean, it's troublesome for the operators. It's troublesome for the state regulators because they're sort of in limbo waiting to see what happens. But it's really troublesome for every person involved in the industry because even the patients and consumers, they're the ones that suffer the most because there's nobody overseeing, their safety. I mean, I spend a lot of time connected with the Federal Trade Commission, right? Talking about what we see and reporting stuff, and not reporting on people, but just, talking through adverse events, reporting comorbidities, those kind of things. And nobody does anything. I mean, they do their, investigations and whatever, but there's nobody really overseeing that. Like the state level, they don't even have a lot of the authority that they need to do the same thing they would do for a food company.
Yeah, no, and I think that's such an interesting point, right? Because obviously a lot of the terms, I think at least, for like my generation, when they start hearing regulation, is they think it means like stifling, right? Restricting growth.
Absolutely.
And a lot of it comes from, more of our information around the word regulation is more on the crypto side of things or trading equities, right? We haven't really seen regulation because tobacco and alcohol were already here, right? So is the FDA. So it's funny where that comes in, but, like you're saying, it's a clear example. Without regulation, with overregulation, yes, you can stifle, right? But with no regulation, you actually hurt the people that want the industry to succeed the most because the bad actors can manipulate the short-term circumstances where the good actors that want to be there long-term are now falling, short or victim to the bad actors, like where the farmers are ecstatic, they convert, their 350-acre farm from livestock to hemp, And in the first year, they produce, tremendous acreage of raw material, assuming that they're going to be able to sell it at, whatever the price was compared to livestock or dairy or whatever they were doing previously. And then again, they got hurt through the regulation process and the fees. Now they can't even sell the product again. It's like having too much milk and having to dump it because you can't. So it's shameful, kind of. Yeah.
It's terrible. Yeah. I mean, and part of, for me, for focus, and part of, what's important to me is that we're actually helping those small businesses. So of course, the guys that work in multi-states with, 11 or 12 different regulatory structures to follow are an intuitive client for us, because we eliminate all that craziness of trying to follow all these different regs. But part of what our goal is to really help the small businesses compete against these big guys as well. So we work to develop our certification process for the micro business licenses so that it doesn't cost them as much. It's not as intensive. It might take a little longer, but they have a pathway forward so that they can have their GMP certification or their quality certification. They can import and export into any other country in the world because they've met these standards. And cannabis is a small business industry. I realize that it's getting commercial quickly, but it started with hundreds and hundreds of small businesses, the thousands and hundreds of that, you know what I mean? And it's still very much there today. And as happens in any industry, as we're growing, and we're certainly growing quickly in this industry, like, bigger operators, more money, more opportunity, more, access to capital, like that kind of thing. But it's important to keep those small businesses into this. I mean, many of those are the farmers that have been doing this for, decades and decades and decades with their family. And this is, they've grown up and they've done this on their farms. And I had the opportunity to go to Morocco in October and, have the government host us. And we got to go up to some of the hashish farms that are way up in the north that have been there for, 800 years. And
longer than the US. Yeah.
Literally, and see these things. So it's cool. There's a lot of different things to it, but you have to kind of think about that part of it, because it really is the way cannabis is. The reason cannabis is still here is because of all those small people that were still doing it while it was illegal, that were using it as medicine, that were learning how to grow it. Like, that's how this industry started in the US. And we have not done a good job of being respectful of that heritage to those people. And you see a lot of states, offer equity programs for people that have been harmed by the war on drugs and stuff like that. Or as an industry, not even there. We do not have a single good equity program in the country. I mean, in my opinion, we don't have a single good state regulatory program in the country yet. We've got some that are getting better, but it's, it's a problem. And cannabis, and that, again, this is like another area that cannabis hits, right? So food, beverage, pharma, industrial, but it's also equity and prisons and law enforcement, and it affects everything. And so once you start kind of understanding that, it's almost like an anthropology kind of thing. You've got to understand the history and the culture and the topography and the people and the laws, and you know what I mean? And so when we're going into a country like Morocco, we don't want to go in and set up a state or a country-wide program for them and ignore the people that have been doing that for all these years, right? We want their knowledge. They know more than most people. So we want to use what they know. We want to bring them the resources and training they need, but be able to build a system where we're going to bring those people that were outside the regulatory system in. We're going to give them time to standardize their operations and the resources they need to be able to compete in this market. And then we'll open it up to the businesses, right? Because that's where you make change from a social perspective as well. And cannabis is a lot, because it's all of these things.
Definitely. No, I absolutely love that. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think, that's where some people are worried about when they hear regulations. They think not only is it a stifle, but they think it's going to be an opportunity where, okay, once the government comes in and they legalize it, right, and then how long is it going to be to all the huge big players come in and just start gobbling everything up? And it's a fair concern. I can't speak to knowing what's happening, but there's no secret that a lot of, like we said, big pharma guys they have all the facilities already. They probably have all the formulas already. They have all the IP, and they're just waiting till the day where, they pull the trigger on the full implementation of it. And, you just hope that our government, when they do bring in the regulations, will have a way to, phase that out and ensure that, economically, Denver and different use cases have been a good example of how that tax revenue can help educations, right? The roads,
Yep.
if it is controlled and spent the way it says it's going to be spent, as any government policy.
And that's part of the thing, that the graphic that you were showing before, the roadmap. I mean, that's basically our work this year. I mean, we're going to update our standards and do some other things, but our goal is to try, and it probably won't get done this year. I mean, it's probably a few-year project, but we're working, with the Association of Food and Drug Officials and any stakeholders that want to get involved to say, how do we flesh out those parts of that framework that aren't there yet? What agencies, what kind of expertise do we need? What other industries are involved? And then what do we need to define so that everybody's talking about the same thing? I mean, that's one of the hardest things in cannabis, because there's absolutely no similarity in nomenclature.
Yep.
Something can, it can be cannabis in one state and marijuana in the other, and it's the same thing. But it's even more than that. I mean, it's how they measure it. It's everything. Like, just nothing's the same. Like, they can call an analytical testing lab a safety site in one state, but in everywhere else it's called, this or that. It just, there's no continuity in language, which makes regulations terribly hard too. And I think, building that out and sort of flushing all that out is really the important part. Because again, we don't want to cut out. I mean, even if you don't care about cannabis, you want nothing to do with it, it's never going to impact your life directly. We still, as a country, want to do what's best for our country and our people and our businesses and the planet, and utilize opportunities like cannabis presents,
Definitely. No, most certainly. And I think, kind of leading in, I think we dove really well on, obviously, the regulations that can be coming into play, right? The different systems and actors that do already exist, right? In the roles that they're playing. And obviously, most often a conversation that comes up once we can get public and private, on the same page is, how can emerging technology, play a role in this, right? There's often a conversation around blockchain technology, right? And its ability to track, ensure everything's encrypted and make sure nothing can be changed, right? And have that interoperability across all the states.
Yeah.
And then it's no secret, a lot of these organizations, of course, have some level of their own technology or existing systems that they're using. And so far, to my knowledge, I might say the acronym wrong, but it's like MTREC, right? METRC, or MTREC is the first actually, technology-driven and automated compliance reporting system that different states are starting to adopt or, trying to push more and more. Is that a fair description of what MTREC is? It seems like you might have a clearer one for us.
RFID tags for plants. That's what MTREC is. And they use plastic tags, and it gives states assurances that they think they can see when a plant is being moved, and that they have some insight into potential diversion or theft. Unfortunately, MTREC in and of itself is a nightmare. They've sort of gotten a monopoly on this industry with the state contracts, which is unfortunate, because they're difficult for the operators, they're difficult for the regulators, they're terrible for the environment, and through their practices with these plastic tags that they don't recycle and all this stuff. But at the same time, we wouldn't have an industry if there wasn't that technology to track that stuff. These states just wouldn't have gone forward. And so we got to take it for what it is and be grateful that it's here, and we can learn from it and build better, because that traceability, that insight into where things are in the plants and what somebody's doing is the reason that this was able to be legalized. That's what gave legislatures in the different states the confidence to do that. So we can't call it all bad. But like anything with software, right? A better iteration's got to be around the corner.
Correct. Yeah. And like you said, I think, it is interesting. Obviously they needed something, right, to get it started. And for people that don't know, what MTREC is, right, or what the whole industry needs, right? Like you're alluding to, Lezli, for the government, and regulators to come on board, is in the cannabis industry, they like to call it seed to sale tracking, right? And all the other manufacturing industries, it's pretty much just, raw material to finished goods being with the consumer, right? Standard supply chain, just with fun marketing phrases around it. At the end of the day, right, what's needed is, at a very high level of the life cycle, you need to know, okay, how many seeds, right? Or how much raw material did this cultivator plant? What did that yield? If he manufactured the product himself, right? Or if he sold it, who did he sell that to? How many end units were they able to manufacture as a finished good from the raw material?
Mhm.
And then from there, what retail locations did it go to? What wholesale locations? And you're essentially tracking it all the way from the source of raw material to output 2 times, right, to the finished product, and then when it is actually consumed. And that's why they want to track, that entire thing. And that's obviously where the significant challenge is, with every state having different regulations and different products all within the state. It can be not only difficult, one, to get technology to track, but two, to do it accurately across the right products.
For sure. For sure. And it's interesting. So the seed to sale software is more in this space, at least. And I realize there's different, terminology in different industries, but they're the inventory monitoring, the sales data, right? So most companies have to use MTREC to track their plants in the ag part, but they still use a seed to sale system, another technology software platform. Some states tell you which one you can use, some let you use whatever, but that's a secondary system that they have to work both, and it sets up the entire sort of downstream effects for problematic technology issues in this industry, because nobody's going out and training these people on MTREC. I mean, MTREC might offer the training, right? But the government's not doing, the states aren't saying you have to have this, anything. Seed to sale software companies are growing so fast, they don't even have the resources to do proper training. I know when I was an operator, we were the largest seed to sale company in the industry. We were their largest company. I mean, they literally put somebody in our facility day in and day out to learn what we needed and make changes, because it's a new industry. So there's some real logistical issues, right, of just figuring stuff out like that. But yeah, it's problematic, because again, I think that the explanation, I think of it like cannabis, like there's so many different systems in the body, right? Your nervous system and this and that. Cannabis hits all these different systems or different industries or different things, and the technology that's needed has to think about all those things, or it has to take individual pieces that do parts of those things and be able to bring it together. And we're not, and this world is incredible with technology, right? I mean, the innovations are just mind-boggling that we see all the time, but we're not there yet with cannabis, because we don't have a system that does it all, that works in a way that people can actually agree, like, yeah, let's use that system. And then you add in, okay, well, what about our customer relationship management software, right? Our CRM stuff, or what about our sales management software, if that's separate, or, what about our email marketing, or our social media and this, and like, so one of the biggest problems, and this is part of the reason I was so excited to meet you guys and understand what you do and be able to kind of work together, is I can't tell you how many times we go into clients and they're like, oh, well, we paid for Salesforce for, however many hundreds of thousands, and we paid for this, and we paid for this, and we paid for this. And, oh no, we don't really use any of them, but we committed, so we're paying for them. And the only reason they're not using them is because they haven't learned how to integrate them. They don't know how to make the software work for them. So it's like the industry is gung-ho about new technology, right? They're ready to jump on it. They love this. It's a very, contemporary, modern industry, but they do that because they think technology will be a solution. And then what they find is they've just got more problems, because they've now got more processes to manage that they haven't defined, and more things that aren't there. And it really I mean, and I can tell you from a personal perspective, I get this. Like, I have had this at Bloom when we were starting the dispensary chain, but I've had it at Focus. And it's if you're not a software person, but you want the ease and the convenience and the automation that software brings, you're going to gravitate towards that. And it only makes sense. It's the right way to go. But we're not at a place at an industry where people really understand how to make that work for them yet.
Definitely. No, I think it's such a great way to explain it, because at the end of the day, a lot of people do think, and I think the worst phrase is like technology solutions, because they are a solution. Yes, but they're not going to solve the problem on its own, just by buying the solution. It's good in and good out. And obviously, even identifying the right software is truly understanding why you even need it in the first place, right? And where are areas you're willing to concede a little bit, right? And not have maybe as deep of reports or as, deep properties in your deal tracking, right, on your sales side, but have 10x the reports on your seed to sale or your compliance reporting.
Whatever
right?
it is,
And
important to that business, yeah, and you have to be able to utilize it for the needs of your business. So you can't come in and sell software to every cannabis company the same way because they're not the same business. And
exactly,
it has to work for that client, and it is a challenge in cannabis across the board, and I'm sure it's the same in other industries, but people are like, businesses are so varied in this space. I mean, like, it's just night and day. I could talk to one client at 8 a.m. and one client at 9 a.m. and they sound like they don't even come from the same planet. Like, you know what I mean? The conversations are so different, and there's a lot of that makes it hard for technology providers too, right? Because technology is good. We've got a lot. I mean, we're getting some amazing sort of seed to sale tracking ERP type systems that are finally coming into this space, which I think will be great. But again, I think that the key to the success around all of it is right around what you guys do, right? With helping people figure out, what do you have today? How can it work together? What is your ideal? And what do we need to do to get you to your ideal, and that kind of stuff? Because cannabis businesses are hard, like I said, and like having an expert to just come in and say, I get that you want this to work. I get it's not where you want it to be, but we don't have to start from scratch. Let's look at where you are. Let's understand your business and help you move forward. I just think it's an invaluable offer for clients, because the problem is, and I think, Brandon, you alluded to earlier that compliance is really expensive. And there's this whole notion that compliance is expensive. Compliance is only expensive when you do it after, right? Mm-hmm. It costs the same to build a building, or relative, I mean, in general, I'm not saying dollar for dollar, but the difference in cost up front to build a facility to focus standards versus to build it however you want is just negligible compared to the difference in the value that it brings down the road. I mean, we tell people all the time, like, if you're going to work with us, the sooner you know what you're doing, even if you're not ready to get certified for 2 years or 5 years, if you want us to look at your plans and do a site review to make sure that you're meeting the standards, that you're using the right materials, that your process flows work, so that you don't have to go and do rework later. You don't have to move sinks. You don't have to, change in and out and egress and ingress and this because there's, cross-contamination issues or whatever. Like, it can cost a fortune to do it later. It's important to do it up front. And I feel like there's some of that with the technology too, that like literally like take a step back from your day to day, which is hard to do in this space because it's chaos, but look at where you're going, because if you do that, the decisions you make, the money you spend, the time and resources that you put into something will be so much more valuable in the long term, and it's just, take a deep breath and kind of slow down is hard in this space. It feels like a frantic spot, and I'm sure it feels like that in every industry too, but I think in this space, because the industry literally changes every day, it kind of is frantic.
Definitely. No, and I think it's 100% true. Speed is good, precision is better. That's what we like to say. If you have to measure twice, cut once, they're all the same phrase, but we tell our customers all the time, I would say like 70% of our work is usually post them trying a system, right? We're very fortunate when we find them as a new fresh business that's assessing systems, then they're in great shape and they never take a misstep because we analyze, right? Yes. Are you paying a little bit for advisory? Yes. But you probably just saved yourself 6 months down the line, or maybe that $10,000 licensing fee of the software that you realize you'll never use it 2 months into buying it for an annual subscription. And, it happens all over the place. It happens with, like you're saying, Lezli, vendors that are giving you your raw materials. You don't do quality control on them. You order the wrong things. Their lead times are long. So then you have to go order from another guy just so you can fulfill orders. Now you have overhead stock, right? There's so many things in the business where I think that plays true. And why we are really excited for, the projects we've been discussing, the different people we're working in this space and you're working in this space, because we're not experts in everything on technology either, right? We focus on the operations, the tracking, the compliance, and really the supply chain specifically. But there's also amazing hardware companies that we're talking to that only work with the growers, right? Yep. And they have sensors on their hardware and automated lighting machines and things that we can connect into our system to give you alerts if your crop is ever at risk. But I don't know, how to go configure all those things in your grow house. And I think whether it's in cannabis or any industry, the sooner all of us industry experts fall into our lane and start collaborating, then we'll be able to continue to drive the industry forward quickly. And I think that's why the cannabis industry is so exciting, because it seems to be happening faster in this industry than any other industry, in history, in regards to, how many truly seasoned people are leaving pharmaceutical manufacturing, $400,000 a year jobs at the top companies to go enter this space and create, a really innovative product that they know will take 3 to 5 years to see if it's successful, not, try to make a quick buck overnight.
We see people all the time that will leave, $150,000, $200,000 a year job, and they'll start as a $15 an hour bud tender in a dispensary because they are committed to wanting to learn this industry inside and out, and they just want to, and they'll work their way up in a system and end up being, a tremendous employee for somebody else down the road because they understand all the different parts. And part of the challenge, in the vertical integration, when it's basically your own supply chain, is they don't have to set up those supply chain deals, right? They don't have to vet their suppliers. They don't have to have all those qualifications in place. They don't think about it. And so the industry hasn't had those, right? And I can tell you for a fact, like, we had lots of times where a shipment of packaging bags that we would sell the flower in wouldn't come in from China. They'd be a month late, and we would literally be like scrambling to find a supplier the day because the harvest was coming down and we didn't want to wait because it's got to be fresh. And, there's so many different issues that are related to that kind of stuff. And there's so much to coordinate that, technology has just got to be part of it.
Definitely. No, I think it's very true. And, hopefully, I think definitely with all the people that are entering the space, I'm aware of some of the bigger guys as well. I think, one of the first public companies is Akerna, right there. I don't know if you've heard of them, Leslie. They're, looking to build, one of the connected supply chains and really leverage open source technology. And they actually fully understand and focus on the small guy, which I think is just, a great mission. They understand that there's going to be all these different facilities and everything that we were mentioning, right, Leslie, you're saying they've got, an ERP system, they've got a CRM, then they've got MTREC. We're not talking about 1,500 employee businesses here. We're talking about, 5 to 25 people on average that are starting this. Yeah, with less than, $100,000, $200,000 as a group looking to, create, get licenses and build all this. And they kind of get a short fuse because you got to get all that in place, get customers, and be successful enough just to have staying power, right? And I think that is where, technology will finally start to give the smaller guys, a much better competitive advantage.
And I think too, just on the data, right? Like the data that the technology produces. Like, I can think of a lot of clients that have said to me all the time, like, pretty sure we're losing money in the tills, right? Not sure if there's some theft or loss or whatever going on here. Like, we want to know more, but I have to go to 6 different places to run a report. And then I have to try and put all of that data from each of the different places into a spreadsheet and make it meaningful. And it, by the time you get it all together, it's just, it's a very common thing. And like, these are small businesses. They have 30 employees. It shouldn't be that hard to figure out what's going on in your business, but they've bought, into these big systems that they've never understood. Had no one to help them with. And it's really, I don't feel like I'm doing a really good job of describing how disruptive in a bad way that is to business. And I'm not talking, disruptive, whatever, but like, it really, like, constantly not being able to access the information that you need, not being able to utilize and learn from your own experiences through your data. It's operating blind. Like, it's very cryptic.
It keeps you in a reactive state, right? And that's the hardest thing. you're always reacting. You can't get ahead of the curve. And
Yep.
that's, where a lot of the businesses face their biggest challenges. And, Brandon always says when we talk about it all the time, he works with tons of companies on, the sales and marketing side. And you laugh, like 90% of what's going wrong in their strategies, right, is their data, or they're reaching out to the wrong customers, or they sent the wrong messaging to the customers. And if you just made the slightest tweak, you don't need a report that shows you every single variable, right?
Yeah,
You
more is not necessarily better.
3 KPIs, focus on those, and get better and improve from there.
Absolutely.
So I think it's really, really true. I personally think, Leslie, this is one of the most in-depth episodes we've certainly had. I think Brandon's still a little shell-shocked over there with all the compliance stuff.
I tell you what, it's been a great conversation. I've really digested a ton, and whether you're pro, against, in the middle, don't care, either way, like, this conversation is valuable because we're talking about things that are, again, in any industry, if it's electric cars, if it's anything new, if it's coming out, these are all very, very important things to discuss. We're talking about the core foundations for business success. I mean, and an industry success. You can't just, there needs to be some type of standards. And I'll just say this and kind of wrap up, but, it's like trying to do my own taxes, and I have multiple things and property and crap. It's difficult. I don't know what I'm doing. So just as I say all the time, is just work with somebody that knows what in the world they are doing and that can lay out a roadmap. Take a left here. There's a big pothole coming. You're going to need to avoid that. Go here. This road's detoured. Go there. Like, work with somebody like Leslie, like Brian, like myself, like somebody, and it may cost money to get a plan. It may not cost, not everything is free, and Googling it may not be the best idea, because you're going to see all types of ads and everything else. So,
and that's the thing. And people, in this industry too, it's been an interesting experience to sort of watch, different than pharma or even in food or anything like that, or just typical manufacturing in other industries, that people are afraid. There's a, I don't want to show you my stuff. I don't want to get in trouble. There's, like this whole, there's the mentality is a little bit different, and that breeds sort of some of these problems, or at least lends them, makes them bigger, because you got to look at what you got to know where you are to know where you got to go. And so, I mean, one of the services that Focus offers, that's probably our most popular service for any aspect of the industry, whether it's, a grower, a manufacturer, a retailer, a lab, or even a state or country regulatory program, is our gap analysis, where the entire process is designed to come in and look at your documentation, look at your facility, look at your processes and procedures and policies, and say, here's where you are today. Let's compare that where you want to be, whether that's with the Focus standards, whether that's with another country's regulation, whatever it is, whether it's just to get compliant with your state stuff, and really look through and figure out all the things that client needs to do to get their business where they want to be. And we start by prioritizing the things that present the greatest risks. And so we'll come in, it can last a day, 2 days, something like that. And this is a very complicated graphic that is more of our internal kind of steps than we would typically show clients. But I mean, literally from a client perspective, the experience is, we're going to set you up a site. We're going to upload, you're going to upload some of your documents. We're going to review them. We're going to write a report. You're going to schedule a day for us to come be on site. We need somebody to come walk through your facility, answer questions that we have about layout, about what happens here, about documentation. We write a report, and the report is prioritized on high risk to low risk. So you can think of it just in very simple, basic, like red, yellow, green, right? Red is something you need to fix now. It's a real risk. Yellow, whatever. We don't actually color code them, but you know what I'm saying? So that they know. And the client then can take that list and do whatever they want with it. They can make all those improvements in-house over time on their own. They can hire the consultant that they already know. They can hire Focus as a consultant to get them there, but at least they have a punch list of what to do. And people don't have that in cannabis. That's the challenge. Like, there's nowhere to go for that checklist of what I need to do, what I'm missing, what is causing my risks, right? And that's literally what we're here to do.
Nice.
Perfect. No, I think, couldn't have said it any better, Lezli. And, like anything, the awareness is key to action at all times. You don't always need to make action, but you first need to be aware. And I think, in our industry and in any industry, right?
Yeah.
You just have to take that first step to become aware, whether it's doing your own research, starting to get involved in communities. If it's not always capital intensive, there's still ways to reach experts like yourself, right? There's LinkedIn and a lot of people in the cannabis community, and really any community that is truly in that industry because they enjoy it, will always take 5 to 10 minutes to answer anybody's questions that they feel are being genuine. So
we answer questions from everybody all the time. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. If you have a question on our chat, we help people write their school reports often, right? Like, I need this for a second. I mean, it happens. But again, that's part of being a nonprofit health and safety organization. We're not here about turning a profit all the time. We're here about building a better industry, and that starts foundationally with education and training.
100%, 100%. And I think, Lezli, that, it might be a great spot to slowly wrap things up. I think we dove into the industry at a depth even I haven't been to yet. So that was, extremely exciting. And I think our audience will truly love it. I just want to give you a second. Please let everybody know, where they can find you on LinkedIn, reach out and connect, and obviously where they can find all the material on Focus. So if they're interested in just learning more about the cannabis industry, or they're interested about going in and opening their own company, they know exactly how to reach you and your team.
Yep, for sure. So our website is focusstandards.org. We should be real easy for it to come up. We've been around for a long time. You can also Google Cannabis Standards and we'll come up. I will say we have a new website that should be updated and published by February 2nd. So it will get a lot clearer and easier to find information. But we also have a terrific support team that is live on the website all the time. If you have a specific question, there's contact forms. I'm on LinkedIn, as is my whole team, all the time. We've got a Focus page. You can find me just at Lezli Engelking. But yeah, we're here to help. I mean, truly, that's one of our hashtags that we use all the time. Everybody needs a little different something in this space, and the whole process is not super defined, but we want to fill those gaps and help this industry get where it needs to be, regardless of what that looks like. So
awesome.
Thank you for your work, Lezli. I appreciate it, man. It's been great to get to know you here and to share your message with our audience, and everyone gets to learn a little bit more. So I really appreciate your work and what you're doing.
Thanks. And thanks so much, guys, for the opportunity. This has been fun. I know I'm a chatterbox, so I do apologize that I went so long.
Don't, you fit right in.
Yes, I can see that.
But perfect. Thank you so much, Lezli. We'll be sure to put your LinkedIn, the website in the show notes as well. So if you didn't catch it in the recording, just head to the description below. Reach out to Lezli's team, and hopefully we'll have maybe Aaron or one of the companies we work together with soon on to future episodes.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, looking forward to it. I think there's lots of stuff. Have a great day, you guys.
Thank you so much, Lezli.